Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
The recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. Thanks for asking. Hope you're well as well. See, I should have said, I hope you're well too. T-O-O. I'm already criticizing my own language.
I'm well
good,
too.
Man. You look like you're good. You're all comfy in your man cave.
Oh yeah, man. We're having a good time here in Huntsville, Alabama. The weather's getting nice, and it felt like it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And just before it was time to start building an ark, the sun poked out. It's going to be a great day today.
Good. Hey, who's those cowboy boots up there on the top shelf?
Those are Andre the Giant's.
Really?
Yes, they are.
Who'd you steal them from?
I bought them from a former WWE office member who wound up inheriting that and the first Intercontinental Championship.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, the plot thickens, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm trying to get you to come off some boots, but you just don't return my calls. I see how.
Yeah, I'm bad about that. Well, I'm in Florida, Conrad, and all my stuff, as you well know, is not here. But I'm going to go back to Oklahoma soon to attend my oldest granddaughter's high school graduation.
Oh, that's cool. Congratulations to her.
Yep, absolutely. She's a sweetheart, beautiful young woman. She wanted to go to ORU, Oral Roberts. I didn't put a kibosh on it, but I strongly suggested she think of other alternatives, like OU. Well, the other thing, I got a nice home there, and I'm gone the majority of the time. It might be somewhere for her, she could live.
Dude, I can't imagine going to college and living in your Oklahoma house. You got that backyard like you like it, the outdoor kitchen and the pool. It's hard to beat. It's
a nice little spot. I think my little Jan would have been very proud of how I continue to spend money on the backyard. But I enjoy the hell out of it. I really do. I enjoy when I'm back there. And now when I book my travel, I always look ahead at the 10-day weather forecast.
Right.
So it's all good. You notice that when you turn this goddamn computer on, they give you about a zillion options to buy something.
Right.
And it's just a giant pain in the ass. Restart, pick a time. There is no time. Restart tonight. Restart to stay up to date. Your version of Windows 10 will soon reach the end of service. Restart to install a newer version. Is that important?
Well, we'll find out.
Yeah. So anyway, my relationship with technology is still less than desirable, but nonetheless. So I wanted to make sure that we said something about wishing Brian James, Road Dogg, speedy recovery from. Yeah. I guess it's been confirmed that he had a heart attack.
As you and I are talking right now, I'm not sure. I know over the weekend, his wife posted on social that she believed he had had a heart attack. They were going to run some tests, but he was not well. And regardless of whether or not he had a heart attack, his wife categorized him as not well. And that means you and I need to take a moment and wish him well, because he's been a big part of our wrestling fandom for everyone listening to this for a long time. And how long have you known Brian? It feels like you would have known him for, gosh, 25, 30 years.
Yeah. I knew him. I met him. I think he might have still been in the Marines.
Wow.
But Brad was the link to all that. Brad, his brother, amazing worker, tremendous talent. And then I got to know Bob, the patriarch, and he was a hell of a good guy. Liked him a lot. He was really good too, boy. And good talker. But then Brian had that same gift. And then Brian became, we hired Brian. And, we went through all the issues, the same, so many, it's a story that just repeats itself. Guys have issues with maintaining their impulses. And so anyway, he worked hard at it. I know that. I know one time we went to WrestleMania right after, I don't remember which one it was. I worked so damn many of them, but he came over to me and said, I need to talk to you for a second. And he never knew what that conversation was going to be like. And he apologized to me for all his, unprofessional conduct, shall we say. And he, that was part of his, 12-step deal or
he was making amends.
Yeah. And it was sincere. And and I don't know if he hadn't put a kibosh on some of his activities, he might not have even been here today, because he was fast laying the hell out of it, as old Joe Walsh would say.
He really is one of the great success stories in wrestling. I mean, you think about it, comes from a wrestling family, fought for our country. I mean, that's a big deal that I don't think enough people talk about.
Yeah.
And then came in and really was almost a throwaway character with the WWF when he was the roadie, but manages to somehow turn that into one hell of a career. I mean, I don't know. There was a period of time that I don't know that there were many acts as over as the New Age Outlaws. And a lot of that was just based on his rap on the way to the ring. I mean, fans were just with it. They were in tune with it. It was cool. And that's really one of the keys to being quote unquote over, is you've got to position yourself to be cool. And man, there was nobody cooler than the New Age Outlaws. And
yep, they did good act. Sorry.
And then he had all the challenges and definitely a down period, but to come through all that on the other side and then really be on the inner circle. And I mean, as Dusty Rhodes would say, a power broker at one point for WWE. I mean, he had major influence and was a big part of the machine. And now to hear that he's got some health stuff, gosh, you hate to see it, because it's such a great success story. And we hope it has a very, very happy ending, and wish him a speedy recovery today.
I bet he recovers, knowing his grit, and the fact that medicine has advanced so much. Part of the issue is, I don't know how the last time he had a major physical. Right. That's one thing about the wrestlers that really bothers me, is that for so many years they had no way to get to pay for their tab at the doctor's office to go and get a full workup, the blood work, a whole 9 yards. And I'm glad people are paying more attention to it now, to be honest with you. So, but I think he'll pull through. I'm being optimistic because I know he's a fighter and very talented. His relationship with Paul Levesque has really enhanced his career at this stage of his life. And he's got great product knowledge. He seems to be a good communicator to the talents. And again, like you just said about the New Age Outlaws being cool, and they were.
Yeah.
A lot of those cats that Road Dogg's been helping tutor and mentor felt the same way.
Yeah.
They were young, influential, and he and Billy, badass Billy Gunn, were very topical. So let's keep our fingers crossed, folks. And I know Brian's on Twitter, and you might not, if you get a chance to send him a get well, or we're thinking about you or whatever, I'm sure he would not oppose that whatsoever. So something to think about if going forward here. But he's changed his life a lot. He was he was high maintenance for a long time, but I'm glad he changed. It changed a lot, and his family's got WWE's been real good to the Armstrongs. Scotty's working there he was a referee. Now he's doing other backstage stuff. So I'm proud of that deal. But the bottom line is this, Conrad. At the end of the day, the best worker of the whole damn family was Brad.
Right.
That's in my opinion, and that's not knocking the other guys. But Brad was very, very special. If Brad had Road Dogg's verbal skills,
well, he'd have been The Rock.
He'd been pretty damn good, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, he'd been pretty good. So anyway, get well, Brian. We're thinking about you, and just keep fighting, man. You're going to be all right.
Yes, he is. And we're talking about another one of the great success stories of professional wrestling today. It's Mankind. We're going to try to cover 96 and 97. There's so much meat on the bone. I don't know that we'll get to all of it, but if we don't, we will have a part 2 very, very soon. But we're covering him today because today, as people are hearing this on April 1st, is the 25-year anniversary of the debut of the Mankind character. The story of Mankind being in the WWF probably couldn't be told without Jim Ross. Fair to say?
Probably. Yeah, probably. His first 3 attempts to get hired were not successful. And that was a result of what was perceived by upper management as less than impressive dark matches, tryouts, whatever you want to say, whatever term you want to use. But when I got the job as head of talent relations, I really was interested in trying to create a different culture in the locker room. There were too many con men. There were too many, hey, brother, or what about my push? And you have the audacity of some guys to say, well, when I get my push, I'll work harder.
Right.
And I'm thinking, really? Are you ribbing me now? Are you really serious? Because if you're really serious, I'm thinking now the thought bubble over my head, I want to do all I can to get your ass out of here.
Right.
We don't need that shit. So, so I knew Mick I watched him a lot in Dallas working for the Von Erichs and others, because the Von Erichs television came into Oklahoma on regular cable every Saturday night. I think it was Saturday nights, yeah. And so I had a feel for the guy, and then myself and others that had a vested interest in his success, we brought him to Atlanta to WCW, where I got to know him very well. And you just saw a guy with high character. He had integrity. He was going to be on time. He was going to work his ass off, and he wasn't popping pills.
Right.
He wasn't walking around like an amoeba. Hey, bro. God, just that was an era where I'd like to forget all of it, because of this seeing guys that were not prepared to handle success.
Right.
Were not prepared to handle the money they were making, and they thought the money trail and the goose that laid the golden egg was never going to fly away. And I think Mick was very conservative with his money. He wasn't living high on the hog, as they say in Oklahoma and Alabama. So I knew the kind of character that he was. Not a TV character, but a human being, maybe better said. So that was how that came about. And then when I went to Vince, he said, well, I had some ideas and some guys I'd like for us to consider. And I mentioned Mick, and he said, oh, no. Oh, ain't going to work. He's tried out. So he asked somebody. I don't know who he asked. He might have asked Bruce or Patterson or somebody, whoever was there. And he, how many times he tried out here? Oh, 3. So I'm thinking, well, maybe you geniuses made a mistake.
Right.
I know that you invented wrestling, and all of you got a vested interest in the extreme knowledge that you have that's extremely higher than mine or anybody that I know. So, but I don't get it. So I asked him, I said, well, if you want me to do this job, you got to give me the chance to do the job. And so that was from the famous, I think I wrote in Slobberknocker, or maybe Under the Black Hat, that you need to know, JR, what it feels like to have a talent break your heart. Because you're really emotionally invested in this guy. You want to bring him in. I can see you're very serious, almost hell-bent on this. But you need to understand what it's like to have a talent break your heart, because he's not going to be successful. Okay. And so he said, what's your idea to do with him? I said, well, here's the deal. We have a 7-foot baby face.
Yes.
And he ain't changing. He ain't turning to be a heel. He's already had that run. And you wouldn't screw with that deal. We're talking about Taker.
Right.
And I used the analogy. I said, Vince, in using NBA parlance, which I had to tell him that meant the National Basketball Association. Oh, yeah. He didn't watch it. But I just tried to use an illustration.
Right.
When the Lakers had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they had the most dominant inside player in the game. And to have a chance, if you're in the Western Division, to get out of their way and make it to the playoffs, or deep in the playoffs, or play for championships, you got to figure out some way to defend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So you got to match up with somebody. And that's kind of how I looked at this deal. We needed a dancing partner for the Undertaker until we got somebody else ready. And we didn't have anybody ready at that point in time, in my view. So that was kind of the dialogue that went into that deal. So, but I'm so glad that Vince acquiesced and saw a different light on Mick, and then he had that Hall of Fame run, and it's been great ever since.
Talk to me a little bit about upper management. You said a minute ago, we heard from upper management that they didn't have any faith or confidence in him, or whatever the phrase you used was. Is that just Vince, or is that Vince and Bruce? Is it Vince, Bruce, and Russo? I mean, who is sort of pushing back on your insistence that this guy can be a player?
Primarily Vince, but when you see how things work, and then maybe they've changed now, I don't know, but the whoever's in the room in any meeting would take the pulse of the old man before they would declare. So I always thought that was horse shit.
Right.
That's one of those deals where their testicles really would not fit into a thimble. You'd have plenty of room. And come on, drop your set, let's go. And I've told Vince that in private many times. So it's funny to me how so and so said this in this meeting, and just yesterday he and I were talking about this very topic, and he had a completely different view on it. But he waited to hear what you had to say so he wouldn't cross the boss,
right,
or be perceived in that way. Insecurity. And so Vince is primarily the guy that he just didn't believe that Mick would get over. And so I told him my plan with Taker, and I said, hell, if nothing else, we shoot an angle on television. He's a good talker, and we get him to we get a run with him. We get around we're doing house shows, Conrad. We needed main events.
Right. So
it gave us a fresh match, and I also knew that Taker and, as he called him, Jack, i.e. Cactus Jack, Taker and Jack had great respect for each other, because they had worked in those little shitholes and those small houses in Dallas. Not Dallas is a shithole, but there were times when that territory really dipped.
Yeah.
They couldn't have the Von Erichs and the Freebirds forever. And then when the Von Erich Freebird thing ended and the Von Erich situation continued to be very sketchy, personally, the boys, they had nobody ready. So it was a tough place to work, but they went through that, did Taker and Mick. So I believe that he had something. It was a feeling. It was an instinctual feeling. I thought, well, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And Vince could say, I told you so. I told you he's going to break your heart, because you're going to fire him now. And that's what would have happened. He would have said, JR, I'm done with him. Give him his notice today. Okay. So that's kind of how that worked. But basically it was Vince leading the charge. And I don't think Bruce or Pat had any significant issues with Mick Foley whatsoever. but they certainly were not going to cross. They weren't going to die on the hill of Mick Foley to cross the boss. I was willing to do that.
Let's talk about the character Mankind. Of course, we know in this era, the company very much wanted to own the names and likenesses of all their creations. So he wasn't going to come in as Cactus Jack. And Mick Foley had wrestled as Cactus Jack Manson. And of course, most people just knew him as Cactus Jack through his incredible WCW run and his very entertaining ECW run. But it felt like the company didn't really have an appetite for stuff they couldn't own. So we're going to change it up a little bit. What do you remember about hearing about the Mankind character and what the vision for his new persona would be?
Well, I was encouraged. At least we were thinking about something to repackage him with, meaning to me that there's at least some plans for him. So the company and the executives and everybody there could see what we might have in our hands. It's coming back, fell into our lap, because he was not an expensive hire. I don't remember what we paid him the first go around, but the bottom line in that era was, you get that downside guarantee that you can live on if you're not booked, you're not getting over, whatever the reason, whatever's going on. So he wasn't an expensive talent on our roster, but I was just encouraged that, well, maybe this will work. And the key thing was that Mick liked it.
Right.
And I say that, well, because it's just logical. If the talent buy into their persona that has been created or partially created for them, and they buy into it, they're a whole hell of a lot more invested to make it work than not.
Right.
So he liked it. He's ready to go. And so that's kind of how that started out. The mask was an interesting thing because it was a leather deal, stunk like hell. Leather doesn't retain perspiration real well.
No.
It gets gnarly. Or as the cool word now is, what's that word I hate? I don't hate. I don't like it. Wonky. He's wonky. What the fuck does wonky mean? That's a shirt for you. What the F does wonky mean? Wonky. Jesus. Just use a goddamn dictionary. Use the English language a little bit instead of making up shit as you go. Well, that's wonky. What's that mean? So anyhow, that's Mick. He liked the gimmick. He's invested in the gimmick because it was his opportunity to finally get in the biggest game that he ever wanted to play in. And that I was all for.
Let's talk about the debut of the vignettes. January 29th is the first time we would see a vignette. We don't show his mask or his face, but it does show his disfigured ear. How much input did Mick have in these? And do you think the ability to give him some creative freedom with this character made it a home run before it even really got going?
Well, home run, I might not go that far, but it gave him confidence that his creative input was being utilized.
Right. How
well it would get over was still to be determined, but I think it encouraged him to invest everything he had in this new persona. It wasn't Cactus Jack. It wasn't Dude Love. It wasn't Mick Foley. It was Mankind. And he took ownership of it. And I thought that was pretty cool. So, but I don't know, home run, but it ended up being a home run. But he's in the lineup, Conrad. He's in the goddamn lineup. He's playing. Right. So I was a big supporter from the beginning, but I was even more supporter, had more confidence everything was going to work when I saw how much this meant to Mick Foley. And the other thing about it is you get a guy that's universally liked in the locker room. You don't have a short list of guys that don't want to work with him. He worked with everybody we had over time.
Right.
And some guys are just, what's the word I'm looking for? Discerning.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys just bitched about who they worked with sometimes just so they could flex their muscle to the rest of the boys. So, but anyway, he did really well in the input of that thing. And again, he made the character his own. And to Mr. McMahon's credit, Vince McMahon's credit, he did it with Vince let him have that flexibility. He let him have that ability to have input. And I think that was a key turning point. And Vince changed his mind on Mick, obviously, after we got him there. And Vince changed his mind. He saw that, well, there's kind of something here. Because Taker went to Vince, says, I like Jack. He liked Jack too, but Jack Daniels, but right. he liked Jack, and was willing to play ball and have a new dance partner, because Taker knew at the end of the day he's going over.
Right.
But in the meantime, you got to build the guy so that the 7-foot babyface is perceived by the fan base as being in trouble, i.e. being in jeopardy. So it worked out nicely.
But, I know you said it a few times, but I feel like we should zero in to maybe people who aren't picking up what you're putting down. A 7-foot babyface presents a unique challenge, because when you think about, the great sympathetic baby faces of all time, you think about guys like Ricky Morton, where his selling is so believable because people are dominating him for the majority of the match.
Size,
the big hot tag, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
How can you be sympathetic when you're bigger than everybody? Right.
That's right. Well, I learned that working for Bill Watts. Watts was on the territory there in Mid-South, as everybody knows, in the UWF, and he was a 300-pound babyface.
Right.
And he and I had a lot of philosophical discussions on the business in general, which I'll always be indebted to Bill for. He was brilliant. Really was brilliant. He had interesting ways of showing his brilliance at times, but boy, he was a brilliant dude. It was a matter of psychology. And, it's hard to feel empathy or feel like your hero's in jeopardy if he's 7 feet tall and weighs 300 pounds.
Right.
So that was Mick's thing. Mick was, we thought Mick had the ability, and Taker was willing to go there, that let Mick, who's also 300 pounds, Mick's 6'4". So the matchup was pretty good, but Taker, it was a breath of fresh air for Taker. He finally had a heel that could get heat on him, serious heat, because Mick was so reckless, quote unquote, dangerous, unpredictable, all those things. So that's the deal about the 7-foot baby face. You've always got to have a heel that can match up with him psychologically as well as physically. So you're right about the Ricky Morton analogy, Ricky Steamboat analogy. There's been a lot of great baby faces, but they always had the one thing on their side was size.
Right.
They weren't the biggest dog in the fight. Taker was always the biggest dog in the fight, except when he fought Yokozuna or somebody like that. And that's why he liked working with Yoko so much. You go back and look at the parallels, look at the evidence, Your Honor, that Mark Calloway loved working with Yoko, because Yoko made the audience believe the dead man was literally in big, big, deep water.
Let's talk a little bit about these vignettes. We mentioned the one with the ear. We also would see vignettes with Mankind seemingly in the boiler room of the bowels of a building, and he's cuddled up with a rat. No, not that kind, but an actual rat. And it's come out from Bruce Pritchard's podcast, Something to Wrestle, that George the rat was Jim Cornette's real life pet and the rat that was used in these vignettes. Did you know that?
Yeah, of course.
What's the thinking there of, hey, what if? I mean, that's such a story.
Well, we needed a gimmick, and he continued to be weird and strange and the macabre, and what emanates from the bowels of the building are always a mystery and unpredictable. And the rat just seemed to fit the motif. Having a crazy son of a bitch with a leather mask on, missing part of his ear, with missing teeth. He looked like his character. And then, of course, his ability to articulate that verbally was phenomenal. Think about that, Conrad. He changed his whole interview style for Mankind.
Right.
It's a different pitch, different tone. Showed how great a performer Mick Foley was as far as being able to share verbally what his character was feeling at the time. So, the Rat just kind of fit the gimmick, as they say.
The other thing I wanted to mention is the talent roster and how it's really in a state of flux here. You've got Steve Austin debuting, and very quickly he's going to drop the ringmaster thing and become Stone Cold. You've also got the Ultimate Warrior coming back, which people had really high expectations of. The former Johnny B. Bad is coming over and debuting under his real name, Mark Marrow.
And Sable.
And Sable. Who could forget Sable?
Sorry.
And you're about to lose Diesel, Razor Ramon, and the 1-2-3 Kid. So it would be easy to sort of get lost in the shuffle with all these moving parts. But boy, Mankind, he's going to make a splash, and lots of little things I think really added to his presentation. You already explained, the crazy vignettes. We've touched on the unbelievable mask and how different it is from the other masks. I mean, it looks like something almost lucha libre mixed with Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And now we've got something else different that I don't think has really been touched on enough. He had one set of entrance music for his entrance and another set of theme music for his exit. And the piano playing, I don't know. It was a haunting, different. It feels like there was more care put into this character than almost any other in this era. And I wonder how much of that is creative and how much of that is Foley.
A lot of it's Foley. The creative, you can't discount creative because they help facilitate. And once they saw where Mick wanted to be and all these things, they could help facilitate that. So creative had a big hand in that. Once we got the character established, here he's a 6'4", 300-pound walking horror movie, and to come to life. And like all the other talents in wrestling, which goes unnoticed a lot, they all do their own stunts. There's no cut, bring the guy in, the stunt guy, to take a, following thumbtacks or some shit. So he was a walking horror movie. And so he assumed that role. It showed his acting props, for lack of a better term. So he was just he made himself perfect for that role, Conrad.
Let's talk another thing I want to touch on real quick is the finishing maneuver. It's something we haven't seen in wrestling, but it does have a famous history. Tell us about the mandible claw.
Well, the mandible claw, as I understand the story and the legend of it, was a hold used by Dr. Sam Shepard. And Dr. Sam Shepard had, I don't want to go off on a tangent on it, but he had some legal issues. I don't know if he murdered somebody or he attempted to murder somebody, or
there's a whole movie about it with Harrison Ford, The Fugitive.
Yeah. It's a strong story, but the mandible claw was when he got out of prison and he started wrestling. I used to referee matches with back in the 70s with his father-in-law. He was a worker, old worker, probably 50 then, named George Strickland. And most fans that are listening to this have probably never heard of George Strickland, pro wrestler. But I think he was the father-in-law of Dr. Sam Shepard. And I could be off on this, but I think that's accurate. And, he'd tell me stories about Sam Shepard. He was wrongly convicted, and that kind of came to light, but he'd already spent quite a bit of time in the can. So the whole comes from Dr. Sam Shepard and his version of this claw. And I don't think they called it a mandible claw. I can't remember what they called it, to be honest with you. But that's where the whole came from. And here's the thing about that. Now think about this, and when we talk about this a lot here, Wrestling 101. If you're going to get over, your finishing hold has got to be, you got to be able to utilize it on anybody. So he could use it on Conrad as easy, a big man,
yeah,
a super heavyweight, as easy as he could use it on Rey Mysterio.
Right.
and everybody could take it. So I think it just was perfect for Mick. I don't know who came up with that idea, to be honest with you. It might have been him, but it was really an interesting addition to what he did, because in the end we got the hold over. When he went for it, it's kind of like Dr. Britt Becker's evolving in her whole of same basic presentation. People are seeing now when she gets set up for it, the anticipation is there that this thing may be over in a second. And that's kind of the thing with Mick. It added drama to the false finish, and it gave a chance for a wrestler to grab the hand and pull it back or whatever. So it was easy to work with, in other words.
Let's talk about his debut here. He's going to debut the night after WrestleMania 12. He beats Bob Holly with the mandible claw. The debut match is fine with Holly because it's going to lead to something really big. I mean, Raw goes off the air and Mankind attacks the Undertaker and drops the elbow off the apron. I mean, on your debut night, to have all of this happen, you get a win, and immediately we're programming you with Taker, and you're getting to do your iconic elbow off the apron onto the floor that so many WCW fans were familiar with. For a guy who it didn't feel like maybe the company was so high on, by the time the vignettes are in the can and he's actually in the ring, they're going with him, are they not?
Oh, absolutely. And look, let's not discount the input and the influence that Undertaker had in this whole equation.
Right.
When Vince saw that one of his most iconic stars, i.e. the Taker, wanted to do this program and and he was rejuvenated to a certain degree, that's magic for a promoter. Because not only is both men are very, very much equally invested, and Taker was so unselfish that his job was to get Mick over, so that somewhere down the line, when the story concluded, that when Taker went over, he would have beaten somebody significant, and it would have been a great win.
Let's talk about that night when it's off the air. You're done. You're backstage, and Mick Foley, as you said, had tried to get into the company on more than one occasion, 2 or 3 times maybe, and it hadn't been successful. Now he's here, and he's had his big debut. He showed off his new character, and he's working with the Undertaker. Is he elated with the way this all went down? Was Undertaker happy? Do you recall how Vince felt? Like, holy shit, we really got something here.
Well, Vince is going to be happy because Taker's going to be happy.
Okay.
And you always want to keep your stars happy if you can. And it wasn't the fact that Taker was high maintenance or he needed the attention and all that stuff. No more than any other human being needs attention and a certain level of adulation. So I think everybody involved was happy. I mean, Taker was willing to take that elbow off the apron. Mick was more than willing to give it to him, because nobody, at least in my view, had really done anything that significantly damaging to Taker, because you got a 300+ pound guy jumping off the apron and driving his elbow into the heart of the dead man. That's pretty strong shit. And again, it takes 2 to tango. It actually takes 3 to tango, because you still had to have the blessing, so to speak, of the owner. And the he was all in at that point in time.
We're off to the races, and you got to wonder, because the Undertaker had a lot of very brief feuds. I mean, we all remember the silly stuff with Giant Gonzalez, and I mean, it felt like there were a lot of stop and starts. We were just, maybe once upon a time, the company was looking for a monster heel factory for Hulk Hogan, but once upon a time, they're looking for other monsters for the Undertaker to slay. And I could see how you would think, well, this might be a 1 or 2 month deal. Would you have ever predicted that they would go on to have just multi-year feud that they did? Or when did you know, hey man, they click? Was it more, did you see that backstage, or did you have to see it on camera before you were sold on, this is a long-term deal here?
Well, I knew they had chemistry, Conrad, from the get-go, and that's kind of the basis of getting Mick hired, that he and Taker liked each other. They're 2 old pros. And, you know, Taker just made it to WWE before Mick did. It could have worked the other way around and circumstances had fallen differently. But I believed all along that they had a chemistry. And I also believe very strongly that Mick's his physical stature, his ability to promo, his stiff, strong style, if you will, whatever it's called, whatever you want to call it, was magical. It's just we had to develop a story. And to make that happen, you got to have the support of the owner, and the two talents got to be on the same page. Luckily, in this scenario, all those boxes are checked.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next for Mankind, the character. He's going to have a loose affiliation with Goldust where they're going to attack the Undertaker. And it's almost like Taker here has two programs going on at the same time. Do you think Goldust and Mankind were paired together just because their gimmicks were so, for lack of a better word, weird?
I think that's exactly why they were paired together. You know, people are still trying to figure out what Goldust was.
Right.
You know, is he androgynous? Is he a gay character? Is he a bisexual character? What the mystery is surrounding that. And then you get the same thing with Mick. You know, you wonder, well, to what levels will this man go? Speaking of Mick Foley, before he, you know, to hurt somebody to win a match, basically. So the mystique with both characters was present. That's what they had in common. And I think that, and also at that time, my nose itching. That time was, you know, Taker needed more dancing partners, and Goldust is new, somewhat new. He's establishing himself, and who better to establish a heel than with the bull of the woods, the Undertaker. So Taker was a very unselfish. He enjoyed working with both guys, but their weirdness, as you pointed out, was kind of their common denominator.
The other thing I wanted to mention is the first match here between Undertaker and Mankind was a critical success. It goes down King of the Ring, 1996. Yes, that's the famous Austin 316 version of King of the Ring. Meltzer gave it 3.25 stars. Mankind beats the Undertaker on pay-per-view here. Meltzer would recap the match saying, a wild, stiff match with the only negative being that it went too long. Mankind used the elbow off the apron and got a chair, but when he went to use it, Undertaker kicked the chair into Mankind's face. Mankind took a backdrop onto the floor, onto the chair. Then he took a hard chair shot to the back. Mankind got out of the tombstone, hit a neck breaker, and then went for the claw, but it was blocked. He did a lengthy nerve hold at this point, and then later Mankind tried the elbow off the apron again, but this time Undertaker hit him with a chair on the way down and then gave him a hard chair shot to the head. Mankind came back with a pile driver for a near fall and threw a fit for not getting the pin, including pulling out his own hair. Mankind got the urn, but Paul Bearer got it back. Finally, Bearer went to hit Mankind with the urn, but he moved and it hit Undertaker. Mankind then used the claw and got the submission win. Fans were basically shocked by the finish. It's gutsy to have a babyface icon lose in such a convincing fashion, especially a strong gimmick guy. But when they did it at WrestleMania 10 with Bret and Owen, it led to some rematches that drew the biggest houses in a long time. And that is something worth mentioning. In this era, you had an angle, you had a feud, if you will, you built it towards a pay-per-view, and the babyface prevailed, especially in the Undertaker formula of things. And that was not the case here. Do you remember there being a big discussion or debate as to whether or not they were making a mistake deviating from that Undertaker formula here?
No, not really, because it's actually the right thing to do.
Right.
You want to do a program with Taker and Mankind with Mick. So how is the way to start the program having the antagonist lose? I don't think so. And Taker had no issue with it. I believe it was the right thing to do. It was not formulaic. It was not predictable. There's not a goddamn soul in that audience that night. I think, where were we, in Dayton? I think we're in Dayton, Ohio or someplace. That King of the Ring.
Milwaukee.
Was it Milwaukee?
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's in the Central Time Zone. I was close. No, I think it was the right thing to do, and everybody involved had no issues with it. So it's not we get so wrapped up in this shit about who did the job. Oh my God, he beat him right in the middle. That's another good one. A lot of fans who have been following the business, or they really got invested into the online stuff and the digital information, the flow of info. You know, I thought, I can't believe Taker. Taker deserves better than this. Yeah, he got beat, and he got beat by hook or crook. His own earn put him down for Mankind to take an unfair advantage of a down man, and he beat the Undertaker. What better way for a heel to go over and launch his program and his character than that finish? I thought it was excellent. Meltzer gave it 3.25 stars, as you said. I probably would have given it, 4 stars at least. If that's, and I'm not big on the star thing because I don't know what the criteria is, but nonetheless, it's subjective. It's an opinion. I thought they had a hell of a match. I thought it was the only finish that we should do, and it worked out perfectly for the start.
Let's also talk about, well, I know you're going to go on a tangent here, or I suspect you might. This match is sort of loose with the rules, and it really feels like the first time that the rules are a little looser in a WWF match, because we're using lots of outside stuff, gimmicks, if you will. And it's not a no holds barred match. It's not a false count anywhere match, et cetera, et cetera. It's just supposed to be a straight match, but boy, we're using a lot of hardware here. As an old school wrestling purist yourself, how did that strike you? Was this a match that you think back on and think, this is when it started to change a little bit?
Well, I think it's a scenario where it proved to us that when these two guys get together, it's not going to be normal.
Right.
It's going to be different. They're both dangerous characters. So it wasn't I don't know if it was a premeditated mindset. Oh yeah, let's emulate ECW here. Let's not have a lot of structure or rules, and maybe not, but nonetheless, I had no issues with that. I just think it established the platform of this program. It established the parameters of this marriage between two guys. Not Siegfried and Roy, by the way. But not that matters. I'm kidding. It's a joke, folks. It's a joke. God damn it. Loosen up. Please, I'm begging you. We need a little levity in our life. And we're talking about pro wrestling here. Remember that. So, but no, I just thought it was a sign of things to come. I mean, we knew that these two guys, look, Undertaker was more comfortable brawling. And he was a brawler. Meltzer does this award thing every year. And I know that Taker's always figured in for a long time there as one of the best brawlers in the business. I think Meltzer's even named it after the Bruiser Brody Award. So I thought that it just kind of fed into the future where we were going, and it gave the fans something to anticipate, that, boy, this is going to be a fight. And obviously we know that Mick has won that Observer Award many times, the best brawler. So it fit their styles, Conrad. I don't think it was we turned our back on tradition as much as we want to promote what was there, what we had, we thought was going to sell tickets. And by the way, they sold lots of tickets. They both made a lot of money on these live events. So it was all good in that regard.
Something else I wanted to mention here is the finish of this match sees Paul Bearer try to aim his urn towards Mankind, miss, and hit the Undertaker. This is in June. We know the turn is coming in August. Did you guys already know 2 months out like this, we're going to turn Paul Bearer and put him with Mankind, or did that just sort of evolve over the next 60 days or so?
It had been discussed to freshen up the acts. Paul Bearer was such a fixture with Undertaker. along with the music, the attire, the special effects, the smoke, the purple this, and all those things. So, but at some point in time, those acts need to be freshened up.
Right.
And again, because Mick had that run in Dallas, Paul Bearer, Percy Pringle, God bless his soul, was also there. So they became friends. You had two lifelong fans. So you know, I don't know. I don't want to say it was etched in stone, but it was somewhat inevitable that Paul Bearer was going to turn on Undertaker and align himself with this crazy bastard and pose even a bigger threat to the babyface. Put the babyface back in the deep water of jeopardy. And the deep water of jeopardy is a pretty special place to be if you're trying to draw money.
At the next pay-per-view, In Your House International Incident, Mankind would defeat Henry O. Godwin, and Taker would win by DQ over Goldust after The Undertaker was attacked by Mankind. And that leads to them brawling in the Boiler Room. Of course, that's going to lead to the Boiler Room Brawl gimmick match at SummerSlam. Henry O. Godwin wasn't the original opponent. It was Jake the Snake Roberts. Boy, I'm really reaching here. Do you remember why Jake had to miss this show?
No idea. This many years later.
Sure.
I don't know if it was, you know, Jake is always in that era, is seemingly battling those personal demons we talk about.
Even when he was doing this redemption tour with the Yellow Snake and sort of talking about Revelations and how he turned his life over and all that, it was still something on the radar.
Well, you can't erase history.
Right.
And I don't know that he was using in that era. I just know that something came up that prevented him from being there. And normally those are personal issue related. It might not have been this case. I don't want to indict Jake for something he didn't do. But, you know, I said this many times on the show. I think it's no matter what you do for a living, the most important trait you can have is be reliable. When you told me we're going to record this morning, I'm ready. You ain't got to worry about JR being reliable.
Right.
I have to worry about Conrad being reliable. I know.
True. You know, one of the things that you and I have in common is anytime I've ever said, "Hey Jim, what do you think about?" and then I'll pitch some silly harebrained idea, I can always count on this one response from Jim. What time? not yes. Let me think about it. No, maybe. Why would we do that? What time? So you've been a good dance partner for me here.
Oh, good. Let's keep dancing. You know, it looks like a refrigerator dancing with a washer dryer.
It does.
Yeah. So that's okay.
People are digging it though.
Hey, you know, by the way, before I forget about it, I got to remind people to check out we're getting close to that little session we taped when you guys are here in Jacksonville a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
With Eric and Tony, you and me. We're getting around the corner for that thing, aren't we?
I think we're going to debut it the week after WrestleMania. Last week, fans got to hear you and Tony Schiavone hear an alternate call for WrestleMania 3's fantastic match between the Macho Man Randy Savage and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat for the Intercontinental Championship. This week, they'll enjoy another WrestleMania Intercontinental Championship match with commentary from you and Tony. It's WrestleMania 10, the famous ladder match with Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels. But next week, WrestleMania week, if you will, we're pretty excited that we're going to have you and Tony call Brock Lesnar ending the Undertaker streak at WrestleMania 30. Nobody saw that coming. And for whatever reason, you weren't on the call that day. So people can hear your call of that match for the very first time. You can hear all three of those over at adfreeshows.com. And the week after WrestleMania, we do a roundtable with yourself, Tony Schiavone, and Eric Bischoff that I think is going to own the internet. You stole the show that day, Mr. Ross.
Well, I don't know about that, but I had a blast. I know what the word's going to be on the street. Here's what happened. Conrad got JR out there. He had the longest Uber ride in history.
Yeah, it was an hour for sure.
Yeah, for sure, an hour. My ass. And my driver, I'm so happy he may get citizenship someday, but he didn't have no citizenship that day. we had a hell of a time. But nonetheless, they're going to say, well, all they did was Conrad just got everybody drunk. Nobody got drunk.
Right.
Were we drinking? Absolutely. It's like having a happy hour. It's like buddies hanging around and how many people you think are watching March Madness and having a pop? A lot of them.
Yep.
But so it'll be fun to see. Yeah, that'll be. I can predict it now, folks. I know you're going to love it. You're going to laugh your ass off. You're going to be entertained. You're going to be informed. You got 4 distinct personalities there that are contributing, and in a fun way. But the word's going to be everybody was drinking. It's just I don't know. Did Shivani drink anything?
Yeah, he had a few. He had some Moscow mules with you.
Okay. Yeah, he started liking the Moscow mules as long as I make them.
Right.
So, but I don't mind that. It's not hard work. So anyway, I took us on a little different sidebar, but in a tangent here. But it's going to be that's some fun shit coming down the road. I can promise you. So if you're not a ad-free member, now's a very opportune time to jump on board.
As you and I are recording today is the 1-year anniversary of adfreeshows.com, and we've quickly become the biggest Patreon in the whole wrestling space, and we greatly appreciate all your support. If you would have been a member this past month, you would have seen the Jim Crockett interview, part 2 of that famous interview. You would have also been able to do a live Q&A event with Eric Bischoff. Actually, he did 2. So did Dax from FTR. So did Arn Anderson. So did Thunder Rosa. So did the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis, on and on and on. We're giving you unprecedented access behind the velvet rope to the inner workings of professional wrestling, and I'm pretty proud of what we're doing, and we hope you'll consider it. You can get it for like $9 a month over at adfreeshows.com. Go check it out if you haven't already, and you can hear all of these shows and see the video from what JR and I are doing right now with no commercials. So check it out. It's adfreeshows.com. Let's talk a little bit about the mommy angle. Mankind starts referring to Sable as mommy. This is interesting. Mark Mero, of course, is seconded by Sable here. Mankind's going to start stalking Sable whenever Goldust is having a match with Mark Mero, referring to her as mommy. This is some out there weird stuff, is it not?
Yeah, it keeps us talking, and it has added another layer to the mystique of the Mankind character. What does he mean by that? What has happened in his life that would necessitate him calling this bombshell mommy? Because she don't look like no mommy I ever saw. So what was the impetus of him going there? It just added, again, Conrad, that next layer to the character. And it was all these questions that never had answers. And that's not a bad thing when you're writing episodic television. You don't have to answer every single question. You let the audience do their own booking and kind of start figuring things out in their own mindset. So I thought it was a hell of a touch. I mean, it's going to get your attention. And you also know that you're going to pay attention. Now, what the hell did he say? Oh, mommy. And the way he said it, mommy, no mommy. It's like, Jesus, who are you, Anthony Perkins? And we're making a remake of, what was that movie he was in? All the stabbing. Oh, hell, it's a famous horror movie. And there was a TV show about it. Anyway, somebody will correct you. They'll throw it in there. So anyhow, that's kind of that.
You're talking about Norman Bates, right?
Yeah, Norman. Well, Anthony Perkins.
Psycho.
Yeah, it was Norman Bates.
Yeah.
And then they had that. I thought it was a cool series. I enjoyed watching the Bates Motel.
Yeah.
It was on for a good while, and I thought that was a hell of a show. But it says the macabre. They posed more questions than they gave answers, and I think all good fictional episodic television needs to do that and do it more. We don't have to answer every question. For God's sakes, there's no reason to pose a very strong question in regard to building a story and feel compelled that you have to answer it this week. That's just not my flavor of sauce, I promise you.
Let's talk a little bit about Madison Square Garden. We're going to learn in 1997 what a big deal that building was to Mick Foley, the
Yeah.
person behind the Mankind character. Mankind makes his Madison Square Garden debut on August 9th, 1996 here, and he gets a win over Jake Roberts in just 37 seconds. Did you ever have a conversation with Mick about how important Madison Square Garden was for his fandom?
Yeah, when we were bringing him in, you know, one of his goals was, you know, maybe this thing gets over, I'll be able to work the Garden. You know, he hitchhiked to the Garden. He was there at ringside or near ringside when Jimmy Snuka came off the top of that cage on Don Morocco. So he was a lifelong fan of that. And he would get there literally any means necessary. And more often than not, that meant hitchhiking. That's how invested he was in seeing events at the Garden. And then, of course, his goal was to eventually be on a card there. So, yeah, I was very much aware of how important the Garden was for him. And when he was saying, well, maybe someday I'll work there, I'm thinking to myself, because I'm booking the cards, you're goddamn right you're going to be there if you get over. Absolutely. So that was a very, I'm sure went back and asked Mick now, August 9th was a big thing for him to go in the Garden and take on Jake the Snake. And it was one of those deals. You know, Bill Watts had this concept that beating somebody real quick is not the end of the world, because the person that loses can always say, I wasn't ready.
Right.
You got lucky. You know, I don't lose to anybody in 37 seconds. It was a fluke, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I knew it was very much a significant day in the career of Michael Francis Foley.
I also want to mention the Boiler Room match here. It pays off at SummerSlam 96. And it's an interesting concept because most of the match doesn't take place in front of fans. It literally starts in the Boiler Room. And this is, you know, an era of wrestling, I suppose, not just the WWF. We're trying different things. And they get plenty of time here. Mankind gets the win, though, in 26 minutes and 20 seconds. It's much like a movie fight scene, Meltzer would say, with the two bashing each other with objects and Mankind taking hellacious bumps and sick punishment. And he would be critical of it, saying the problem was with no crowd noise audible and the announcers not voicing over the action, the fighting sequence was way too long. Among the highlights were garbage can shots, Mankind turning steam on in Undertaker's face, low blows with an object, etc. They even had a few segments where the picture went out, which must have been on purpose since it was pre-taped, but was kind of bad. Mankind did an elbow drop off a ladder onto the floor and later took a bump while Undertaker threw down the ladder when he was near the top. He got out first and put all kinds of barricades blocking the door. Undertaker still got through the door, and the rest of the segment was live, and he called it really good. They're going to brawl backstage. You see the Undertaker break a 2x4 over Mankind's back, throws the Undertaker into the steps, gives him a pile driver onto the floor. Lots of crazy stuff here. But then eventually, after the crazy Nestea plunge backwards crashing onto the floor, we saw the Undertaker go to get the urn from Bearer, who had his back turned to him, and Mankind uses the mandible claw and goes to get the urn, but Undertaker sits up. Mankind puts the claw back on Undertaker. Bearer then slaps and kicks Undertaker and finally hits him with the urn and gives the urn to Mankind. After the match lights went out and the music played and a group of druids carried the now dead Undertaker to the back, Meltzer would say no rating because so much of it was taped, but Bearer was doing great doing the turn and both worked very hard. The only negative was the Boiler Room stuff just lasted too long and needed commentary and crowd noise, but the announcers did a great job with the turn. You watched it for the first time in a long time recently. What do you think of this execution?
It was a unique match. It's hard to judge a match in this environment, in this particular structure, like you would a normal wrestling match. So the uniqueness of it was certainly significant. I had my doubts about how successful it was going to be because so much of it, Conrad, was hidden from the live audience. It's awfully hard for your fans in attendance, who you're counting on to make a lot of noise, to really get boisterous and invested when they can't see what's going on except on the Titantron. So I was a little bit worried about that, only because of the length of time, apparently the length of time that we were going to be in the dark or in the boiler room. So I was leery about that. I was not leery about how well that Mark and Mick were going to work. We already seen that they had great chemistry. They're going to do fine. I was more worried about the presentation of it and how it segregated the audience from the action. I thought that might be an issue, but I thought it was a unique look. I have so much respect for these dudes, man, because they're doing these things, Conrad. There's not an easy bump in the whole goddamn thing. When you're landing on concrete or you're getting thrown into steel, I use this a line time to time on AEW now, and that's the fact that inanimate objects aren't great tag team partners. It hurts.
Right.
It hurts. And those guys paid the price to hurt and suffer through it to get it done. And again, same basic situation. I think it was a finish that nobody saw coming. I mean, Taker losing was 2 in a row now to take 2 big match type scenarios, right? I don't think anybody called that one, and certainly did not call Paul Bearer changing jerseys and going with Mankind and leaving Undertaker. So I had some apprehensions, but not because of the talents, simply because of how the match was structured and how long that these two cats are going to be in the boiler room.
The moment where Paul Bearer makes the turn, is that one of the all-time moments in WWF history? I got to think it is.
Well, it's certainly right up there, no doubt. It's a very subjective question, but it's certainly something we won't probably forget, because Paul Bearer and Undertaker were so married. They had a long-standing relationship, which out of became a great friendship and camaraderie. So it was kind of emotional. So yeah, I'd say it was probably in the annals of WWE and turns and things of this nature. It's got to rank right up there with some of the best we ever did.
Talk to me a little bit about the way everybody felt about it. Obviously, it's a hell of a thing for Mankind to have this association. Were Undertaker or Paul Bearer leery of a split here, or did they both recognize that it was time for a fresh paint of coat, as Bruce likes to say?
Yeah. Well, no, because I think the story, because you had all these guys involved that were good bookers, so to speak, creative thinkers. We knew that at some point in time, you put them back together on the right circumstance at the right time. Get your mileage out of it while you can. But no, I don't think those guys had any issues with it at all. I mean, they're going to they were friends. They just weren't going to travel together anymore, as I recall. And certainly not, they kayfabed in public. So, but they're going to see each other at these live events. That's a different ballgame than it is now. To try to judge what we did then on today's game makes no sense. The games, the rules have changed, Conrad, as you well know. Everybody's working a more limited schedule. Live events are almost we got a live event coming up in Jacksonville soon, and first one we've ever done in AEW. I'm anxious to see how it works out, how many people show up and enjoy the show, because it's non-televised, no TV. And I used to love those old window cards. And they'd have a house show, live event, whatever you want to call them. And the headline would be at the top of it, no TV. So, you kind of knew that, well, if I really want to see this match, it's not going to be on television. So, but I don't think there was any apprehensions. It was a part of the storytelling. It wasn't to facilitate who got the hotel room or who made the reservation, or did you get the rental car, and all those things. All those things could be addressed. But I think it was the right part. It was the right thing to do because it just fit into the story, and it was a great turn.
Let's talk about what's next here. We're off to the races with this feud, but first, it's going to be announced the next night on Raw that Shawn Michaels is going to be defending his world title against Mankind, fresh off of Mankind's win over the Undertaker at the next pay-per-view. It's In Your House Mind Games, which is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Of course, the old stomping grounds of Mick Foley when he was Cactus Jack in ECW. This is an interesting transition here, or trajectory, if you will. The character debuts in April. He's immediately programmed with the Undertaker. He beats the Undertaker in June. He picks up an easy win on pay-per-view and attacks the Undertaker in July. Has a big gimmick match with him in August. Beats him, takes his manager, and now seemingly he's one of the top guys in the promotion. So he's in line for a title shot. When you first heard the creative, hey, we're going to put Shawn Michaels, the WWF champion, in there against Mankind, were you sort of smiling to yourself thinking, I told you motherfuckers, this guy was legit?
No, but I was not quite that extreme, but I was certainly looking forward to seeing the match because it was going to be two huge contrasts in style. Shawn Michaels had been largely known as, of course, next to your father-in-law, the Nature Boy, one of the best, if not the best, all-around workers in the business. And he's still thought in those regards by a lot of folks. So the other thing about that I was excited about calling the match was that we're going to have to see a different side of Shawn. We can't deviate. Taker cannot become a catch-as-catch-can classic wrestler. We're not, or not Taker, but Mick. Mick is never going to be confused with Jack Briscoe or some of those great amateur type guys. He wasn't going to get behind you unless he would hit you with a shovel or something. So, but I thought it's going to be an opportunity for Shawn Michaels to show the wrestling public that he can fight, because he had to fight to survive. And I thought that match with Taker and Shawn was a defining moment in Shawn Michaels' career. It took him to a different place where he celebrated. It was a hell of an opportunity for him to kind of tweak his game a little bit. And Mick was a perfect facilitator to that. So I thought that match with with Shawn and Mick was huge for both guys, especially for Shawn Michaels.
Before we talk about that match, which is one of my favorite pay-per-view matches of the year, I do want to mention the Undertaker got a staph infection while working in Puerto Rico, and some of the house shows needed to be rebooked as a result. A couple of the nights are booked with Mark Henry bear hugging Mick and putting him in a casket intended for Taker. Then we get to Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and it's decided that Bill Watts and Mankind get into it. Who was that put together by? It feels like this has your fingerprints on it, but it's sort of an interesting deviation from what was probably originally booked.
Well, we just needed a kind of a local hook, something that would be short and sweet, and would capture the emotions of our live audience and so responses and so forth. And Cowboy was that living legend that lived there. It's like going to Pittsburgh and we're going to do something with Bruno type deal. You go to the local hero, and Watts was a legend. He was an icon in that territory. He was a walking tall Cowboy Bill Watts, and people knew that. We're not sure how Cowboy is going to fare with Mankind, but we do know that he's not going to run. We do know that he will fight, and it's going to be most interesting. So I had no issues with that booking. I thought it made sense. We're looking for somebody. I said, well, how about Cowboy? Makes sense to me.
Right.
And of course, it's a payday involved. And Bill's a longtime pro wrestler, and we know what motivates pro wrestlers: paydays. Remember, Conrad, when somebody tells you, some of your people, anybody, it's not really about the money, Conrad. I just want to do mortgages. Bullshit.
Right.
It's all about the money, baby. And as it should be. That should be your motivator because it's a different game every day. I love part of my life that I enjoyed the most was being a commission salesperson. I always found it to be challenging and you know, kind of a daunting task. And I can see why people have done sales jobs like that for their entire adult life because it's a stimulant. And the fact that the better they do, the more product knowledge they have, and the more money they're going to make. And that's what always, when you're born poor and you grow up poor, it's funny how the money, how much a part of it, how it plays in your life. I still work now hard as hell. And somebody told me the other day, said, God damn, you work like you're broke. Well, luckily I'm not broke, but I still have the same passion for working.
Right.
I enjoy earning the money. I enjoy creating new revenue streams. And now that I got, granddaughters getting older and my own daughters are getting older, it's time to start thinking about things along those lines because I'm not going to do this forever. I like to do this forever, but I don't know, getting back on the road, which we think we're going to do.
Right.
AEW coming up, it's going to be great. I enjoy those trips, but to say I want to be doing this when I'm past 70,
maybe not.
Well, day by day, year by year. So that's going to work for me. So, anyway, I don't know where we got on that, but in any event, Cowboy was a good choice for that market. It'd been no different if we were in Dallas, Conrad, and we were able to do something with Fritz Von Erich, obviously, not Fritz the cat or some cartoon. You know what I'm saying? Cowboy was willing to do it and had no problem. So, and it's funny that a lot of guys would probably, you're going to kill my town. You haven't worked in 20 years, you asshole. What are you going to kill your town? Spent my whole life building this market up. Yeah, that's why the summits went out of business because you couldn't sell tickets. You couldn't sell sex on a troop train. So, anyhow, I thought it worked out pretty good. I don't remember what those houses were or how, but I until I went back and read our notes, I'd forgotten about Cowboy and Mankind. And I can tell you, Mick had immense respect for Bill Watts. He was a fan, and Cowboy was a big player for a long time since he headlined the Garden with Bruno 3 times. So I liked I thought that was kind of cool booking. It's for a mark like me and an Oklahoma kid, see the guy that broke you in, get another payday and get the adulation from the crowd was pretty damn cool for me.
Agree. Super cool.
Yep.
Let's talk about Mind Games. One of my favorite matches. If you're going to go watch one Mankind match from 1996, I understand why you'd want it to be the Boiler Room Brawl, but I think it should be this one. It's the September 1996 In Your House, and early in the show, we see Mankind cut a promo to make sure the crowd boos him. I know that sounds silly since he's beating up our hero, the Undertaker, but in Philadelphia, these people booed Santa Claus. These are hardcore fans to the bone, and they love his contributions, not only as Cactus Jack in WCW, but in ECW as well. And coincidentally, we have some ECW brethren, Tommy Dreamer, the Sandman, and even the Pied Piper himself, Mr. Paulie Dangerously, sitting front row. And they're going to have a little bit of an interaction with Justin Hawk Bradshaw and Savio Vega. And they're doing that to just create some buzz, if you will. But then if we cart out another ECW themed guy, a hardcore in his own right, Mr. Mankind, then maybe they'll boo him or maybe they'll cheer him and sort of regurgitate the white meat baby face Shawn Michaels. So we have Mankind cut this promo to sort of set the tone. And to this day, Mick Foley says this is one of, if not the best match he ever had. Meltzer agreed. He gave it 4 3/4 stars. Shawn Michaels gets the win when he beats Mankind by DQ in 26-25. And I know that, Meltzer's a controversial figure in certain circles, but let's just agree that he doesn't normally give matches that end in DQ 4 3/4 stars. But this was different. You guys showed a hardened edge of Shawn Michaels.
Right.
And I think it's one of his best performances from both guys that they had in the company, certainly in this year What else can you tell us about this match?
Well, this man, I may get off jump the gun here a little bit. This is a match that proved to the fans that Shawn Michaels was tough.
Yep.
And he could fight.
Yep.
And I thought that was really important because Shawn had always been known as a kind of a finesse guy, you know, slick, smooth, arm drag, drop toe hold, super kick, you know, things of that nature. Very, very sophisticated style. But can he fight? So you see him throwing some punches on a comeback or something, but he was not known as a brawler. Working with Mankind, Shawn had to brawl, successfully brawl, or get eaten alive. So I thought this is the match I was thinking about where I thought it did more for Shawn's career than to date any match he ever did. And I don't know, the only other match I could think that was as significant as that might be the WrestleMania 25 match with Taker, ironically. Not the fact that Shawn has other great matches, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just a fabulous presentation by both guys. And again, as I said earlier, and I apologize for jumping the gun, I just think it probably did as much for Shawn Michaels' career as any match that I remember him having.
And there he is calling you there to thank you for signing Mick Foley.
Oh, it's that Vince, God almighty. Just leave me alone.
Seriously, go back and watch this. It's incredible what all they do here. This is one of the first ever Spanish announce table spots. You would see Shawn Michaels do his best Sabu impression, running across the ring, leaping off a chair, super kicking the chair Mankind was holding into his face. I guess that's like a modified Van Daminator. Either way, though, just phenomenal. One of the things that still sticks out in my mind all this time later is when they peel back the padding around the ring, he drapes it over Mankind and then just jumps up and down on him, sort of stomping on him. It just shows you that, man, there is a mean streak to Shawn Michaels as a champion.
And he needed Conrad, he needed to illustrate that.
Yes.
This is not about a nifty arm drag or a beautiful drop kick or head scissors. It's a traditional babyface material. And so that's why I say Shawn, thanks to Mick and Shawn's ability, he took a giant step forward in his own perception. And so again, it's just shining up the race car. You know, you ain't got to change the color, but shine it up, change a little bit, you know, whatever. Evolve, in other words. It's important for all of us to evolve in what we do. And Shawn evolved brilliantly that night with Mick.
The DQ's kind of weird. Meltzer would say, as he went for the pin, Michael strangely got up and started punching Vader for the DQ. My guess is Vader was supposed to interfere at the count of 2, but was a tad bit slow and they had to improvise. As Michaels took care of Vader, Paul Bearer hit Shawn with the urn. Sid then ran in and chased Vader to the back. Bearer used the urn and Mankind sat up like the Undertaker. He went to put Michaels in the casket, but when they opened the lid, the Undertaker got out and chased Mankind to the back. A super match, but the week ending kept it from being the match of the year. I think as far as the WWF goes, it was the match of the year. I enjoyed it more than the Bret Hart Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania 12, and people still take issue with my stance there. What about you? Do you prefer the Shawn Bret match at WrestleMania 12 or Shawn and Mankind here at In Your House?
Oh gosh. Well, they're two different pieces of steak.
Of course.
To be honest with you. It's hard, you know, the you got to like an hour plus match. You got to like somebody going an hour. And I know for Bret and Shawn at WrestleMania 12, to do the hour, as the boys say, we're going to do the hour, was kind of a, you know, kind of an alpha male type thing in the old school wrestling ways.
Right.
Because we saw a lot more hour Broadways back in that era and just adjacent to that era than we see today, obviously. But I think I'd probably go with the Shawn and Mankind match. I didn't like the inclusion of Vader in it. I did not like the inclusion of Sid in it. Nothing against either man. because your biggest surprise should have been better protected, and that was when Undertaker rose from the casket.
Right.
And so I thought that was enough extracurricular stuff because the match was beautiful. I think maybe looking at this finish, it sounded like a Pat Patterson finish because Pat had all these wrinkles, all these little surprises along the journey. You knew when Pat booked a match, you knew where you're going to start from. You always knew where you were going to what your designation was going to be, where you're going to go. But on that journey to the local barbecue store, you might stop off someplace else and have a beer. You might stop over here and go to the zoo, or whatever. Pat always had these crazy ideas and they're good ideas more often than not, to take you on this journey that is a predictable journey, but you didn't know what stops are planned along the way.
Right.
I think that's kind of what we got here. We wanted to add, we're trying to get Vader over, trying to get Sid over, all these things. And that was not a good marriage, good chemistry, in my view. You got to be totally unselfish. You got two big bruisers like that. And that's hard to do. They're both trying to get over and make money. You got to have confidence in both guys. And I don't know that Sid and Vader had great confidence in each other to be, I don't want to say fair and impartial, but to be objective and to be unselfish. So if I was going back and rebooking this match, it would have been without Sid and without Vader, and highlighting more on the big surprise reveal that Undertaker's in a goddamn casket all along. To me, that's some money.
Let's talk about the big payoff from that moment with the Undertaker. It's going to be a buried alive match in Indianapolis, but the way we start the build here is 2 weeks after his match with Shawn Michaels. We see a vignette of Mankind in a cemetery preparing for this buried alive match. Who do you think deserves the credit or the blame for the first ever buried alive concept?
Well, it was a brilliant idea to promote. The visuals, the vignettes, promotional tools for that match being so unique, I thought was a very viable thing. But then you find out it's harder to execute in actuality than it is to create an image or a graphic or a vignette or whatever it may be. So I was never a major fan of the buried alive scenario because of that. But they certainly, this match here we're talking about, I mean, the people liked it. Seemed like Meltzer liked it pretty good.
Sure.
So, I guess in that regard, it was a success. I know we did a big favor for Terry Gordy through Michael Hayes to get Terry some work, because Terry had, left some bad baggage along the way, which is sad, because he was absolutely phenomenal. As a matter of fact, Michael Hayes had a birthday this week.
Yes, he did. Happy belated to him.
Was he like 90? Michael, Michael doesn't dress in colors. He dresses in flavors. I always thought that seeing what Hayes was going to wear at WrestleMania was always a treat. Bright orange, an orange hat, orange shoes, or green, or whatever. So he was like Vince back in the day. He didn't dress in colors. He dressed in flavors.
He's 62, if anybody's wondering.
Is he? Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah.
He could draw Social Security right now, Conrad.
I don't think have to worry about that with him.
I think he's a lifer. I think he's gonna, like a lot of us probably will end up doing. He's gonna work until Conrad comes on and says, "I got bad news about JR."
Oh, come on.
Well, I'm not. What am I going to quit? Well, quit and do what? My fat ass likes hanging out. Lawler called me this week. He's hosting the Hall of Fame scaled down version of the Hall of Fame, and so he says, "What "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." "You're not doing anything?" I said, "No. I got a manicure and a pedicure today. I went to Publix. I have my car washed. That's pretty much it for me."
Right.
And he said, I said, "Here, Jerry, I'll give you a quote from my grandpa. Granddad, what are you doing today?" "Not a goddamn thing, son. And I'm not going to stop."
That's great.
That's me. So, I think Hayes is a lifer, and he's been a very valuable asset there who made some terrible mistakes along the way that could have got his ass fired. But luckily that did not occur. So I'm glad Michael's there, and he's seemingly healthy and somewhat sane. He'll never be totally sane because he's a goddamn freebird. And I say that in all respect with an attaboy. He's just a different cat. I think he thinks he's still one of the Allman brothers or Leonard Skinner. I think if Michael could trade his life as a wrestling person into being a member of the Leonard Skinner band, but not being on the plane when it went down, he might consider that.
Of course. Let's talk about Vince McMahon and his perception of Mankind. We see that there's going to be a major moment at SummerSlam. Of course, we've talked about when Paul Bearer turned and joined him. But now he's going to follow up the next two pay-per-views with Mankind, not only in a feature match, but the main event. You know, he was the main event in September against Shawn Michaels. Now he's the main event the next month in October against The Undertaker. When do you think it clicked for Vince and he realized, wait a minute, this is a top star for us? Did it happen at that SummerSlam show or before, after?
I think it happened before. I think he felt it. You know, I've mentioned this on this podcast today. You know, Vince relied on talents that he trusted. One of the great traits of a really, really good booker is that you bring guys in, or you put two guys in a marriage, and you count on them to add some creative to it. The more they add to it, the better it's going to be executed. That's called ego. It's whatever you want to call it, because I don't want to contribute an idea to Conrad to the ad-free network. It's going to suck.
Right.
So I think Vince saw early on, thanks to Taker's selling, and said, "Man, I think we're on to something here, boss." And that's all Vince needed to hear. Your main star felt it. Your main star felt invested. So he's on to something. And I'm going to make sure that that we don't cut this thing short. So I think it happened earlier, Conrad. Now I think as time went on, when you see, the thing about it was like all the big matches all the big matches that Mick has been in have been basically with Undertaker. How's he going to do wrestling a guy that was somewhat known to be temperamental,
right,
impetuous at times, short-tempered, and one of Vince's favorites? So how's that going to be? And then when we saw how that match played out, as we just got through talking about, it's fabulous. One of the best matches of the entire year, without a doubt. Sure. Even though it had kind of a wonky finish. Wonky. Hi, I'm wonky. LOL. OMG. Anything else? No, good.
WTF. All right, let's go. Let's talk about the Buried Alive match. Undertaker beats Mankind 18 minutes, 25 seconds. It's weird. You know, they've built a dirt mound cemetery behind the ringside seats on the arena floor.
Yep.
The ending's kind of goofy. Mankind's pulling out all the stops, as always, taking major bumps into the guardrail, over the guardrail, onto the floor, onto the steps. The Undertaker even does a great plancha, and Meltzer says he's probably the biggest guy to ever try such a stunt.
That's pretty amazing.
It was.
See, I didn't know that spot. You know, my style of announcing is best when I don't know the finish or I don't know the specifics. I don't want to precondition myself. Someone says, why don't you want to know all that information? Because wouldn't you be able to tell a better story? Well, it seems like that concept works pretty well it worked in March Madness. I don't think any of those refs knew who was going to win the games.
Right.
Same thing in football or any other mainstream sport. So if I want to have that mindset and that presentation of reality-based wrestling as best I can make it, then I don't need to be preconditioned myself about, because it's easy to say, boy, I dread this one. Hear the finish? Oh, Jesus Christ. So all of a sudden you go into a match with that mindset. It's the drizzling shits.
Right.
And we all know, Conrad, that the drizzling shits are the worst kind of shits because a fart can turn into a disaster.
That's all
Remember
very
that.
true.
Remember that. So, but yeah, I just thought that I think Mick sold himself. Look, he always, again, said this earlier. We forget about these little things. He was never late for work.
Right.
He never came to work in an altered state. It's just he was so reliable, and he did everything the right way. He's the epitome of what if you're a young wrestler, who can I emulate? Well, I'm not going to tell you to emulate his bumps.
No.
But, I'm not advocating that whatsoever. I'm just saying he's the guy you emulate if you want professionalism and integrity and to be well respected by not only the office, but I think more importantly with your peers and your teammates. Because there wasn't a guy on this roster who said this earlier that wouldn't want to have a match with Mick Foley. It's different. It's fun. Mick's style was unique. So, I think that they had, I think when Vince saw Mark's matches with Taker, with Mankind, and saw his mixed match with Sean, he was really sold. And no reason not to be.
And now they're really trying this, different stuff. I mean, we had a boiler room match in October. Now we're burying folks alive in October. And then Terry Gordy shows up under a mask with a shovel. He's known as the Executioner. He's here for a cup of coffee. He hits
not a great idea.
He hit the Undertaker with a shovel. He pulls Mankind out of the grave, puts the Undertaker in the grave, and then all the heels, including Goldust, come out and start burying the Undertaker. And it looks like our Undertaker is finally dead and gone for real. He's buried. And then thunder and lightning hits the arena and his hand pops up through the grass. It's a little hokey, but it's big on sports entertainment. 3 3/4 stars. We'll talk about the thunder and lightning in a moment. But as soon as I mentioned Terry Gordy, you had a reaction. Not a good idea. This is not the Terry Gordy we grew up with.
Oh,
tell us who was an advocate for this, how it happened, why it didn't last.
Well, I think anybody that was there was an advocate for it because it gave Terry a chance to get back in the game. Because anybody that knew Terry over his lifespan as a pro wrestler knew that there was never a better athletic big man than Terry Gordy.
Yep.
I mean, he was great at 16. And I bet we have a fair amount of folks enjoying our product here that's in their, young. And think about that. Think about going on the road with a bunch of men and you're 16 or 17 years old and you're wrestling and holding your own with all of them. All of a sudden you're maybe the best worker on the card and you're a teenager.
Yeah.
So if we didn't have that Terry Gordy. Terry Gordy was a hire. I mean, Michael Hayes was very instrumental in getting Terry an opportunity to make some paydays. Our hope was, Conrad, maybe we'll get lucky here. Maybe the spark will ignite. But talking to Terry, you could tell something wasn't quite clicking. He's kind of burnt out. And I think a lot of that was, his heavy use of drugs over the years, concussions. How many concussions do you think he got taking chair shots from the Von Erichs?
Right.
I'd say many. So he wasn't the same. He was damaged, Terry Gordy, damaged goods. But we were hoping that he instinctively, that he could execute what we needed him to execute and protect our investment in the Undertaker and give the Undertaker another big guy that could bump fairly well still as a new adversary. Again, 7-foot, 300-pound baby faces need big adversaries more often than not. So I think all of us were for bringing Terry back to try to give the guy some payday and some self-esteem. You know, you couldn't help but love the guy. But we saw firsthand what he had become, and he did not need to be back on the road, in my opinion. But we didn't know that beforehand. I'm not being a mind reader or some predicting the future. It just, I said this about Scott Hall one time. We did the Plane Ride from Hell show. We didn't do Scott any favors putting him back on the road.
Right.
We thought he was ready. His buddies thought he was ready. We wanted him to be ready, but he wasn't prepared to go back for the on the road with all the temptations and so forth. Terry, I didn't notice that about him. I just thought when we got him hired, it wasn't the same. So that's luckily we got through it, but it didn't last long, and that's why it didn't last long. Can you imagine a vibrant Terry Gordy working with Undertaker
or Steve Austin?
Oh yeah, we can start to just go down the list.
Oh, Shawn Michaels, on and on and on.
Yeah, but we didn't have that guy.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of the Buried Alive match, and then how we really double down on the supernatural, so to speak. Thunder and lightning, and then like the finish of a horror movie, the hand punches through that glove of the Undertaker. Cowboy ever book anything like this?
No. No, I don't think we didn't ever have anything quite that elaborate in the Mid-South. Now, if you're going to talk about blood, we have plenty of blood, plenty of violence, but nothing that Cowboy would perceive to be eye rolling or too staged. You know,
not talking about Cowboy, talking about Jim Ross. What do you think of this? The Buried Alive and the Thunder and the Lightning and all
that. Because we didn't overuse it, I was okay. To say to you and our audience that I loved it would be lying to you guys, and I'm not going to do that. This is our 101st show. I haven't done it yet. Not going to do it now. I wasn't crazy about it, simply because of the execution of it. There was no precedent for it. Now, that means two things. There was no precedent for it, so we didn't really know exactly what the guys could do or would want to do in the environment that they were booked in. At the same time, because it had no precedent, it was brand ass new. And so the curiosity factor, I think, was where the markability and the viability of that match came into play. So I can't say as I hated it, but I didn't need to see any more of them, personally.
Do you know what the secret of a Buried Alive match is?
The secret?
Well, I mean, you're going to cover a guy up with dirt. I assume.
You mean death? Suffocation?
There's some magic involved here. A trap door and some oxygen or some such, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you don't want to. Yeah. This is fiction here.
Right.
So safety first. That was quite the structure, little underground tunnels and all that stuff. You know, I never got in there to see because, you know, somebody ribbed my ass and shut the door. So I didn't investigate. I thought it might have been a little hair gimmicky.
Yeah.
It's hard to suspend your disbelief in that environment. And again, not because of Mick or Taker, because of how they were being utilized and how they were being booked. I thought was a little bit challenging for everybody to have the match that they wanted. But again, you go back and look at the other side of it and the glass half full. Well, we've never done one before. It's a brand new deal. So maybe we can get by with one. Did we ever? I don't think we ever had another one, did we?
Yeah, there were other Buried Alive matches even during Austin's run, but it's interesting this one in particular because it is the first one, and I think Mick Foley tells a pretty hilarious story about, you know, this is the 2 hour era of In Your House, so it's a cheaper pay-per-view and it's also a shorter runtime. So instead of it being the traditional 3 hours and maybe $29, maybe it's $14 or $19, but it's 2 hours. So it's less money, but it's also less time. But the show didn't end for the live crowd here. Instead, they've got another match right behind it. So the show goes off the air if you bought it on pay-per-view. But now with a man we've just seen been buried alive, he's dead now. We've witnessed a murder. They bring out the New Rockers, and here comes Al Snow as Leif Cassidy and Marty Jannetty. It's just phenomenal when you think about the context of that.
That's a let me up match, Conrad. The justification for following something so extraordinary was, well, now we need a let me up match. So those guys fill the role of letting us up.
This is also the first time that the Undertaker gets a win over Mankind. And of course, he technically won the match, but he's the one who wound up buried. So they're saving the pinfall finish for another time. And what will it be? Survivor Series 1996. Mick Foley's finally going to get his major match in Madison Square Garden, the match he dreamed of as a little boy. And it's with the Undertaker. And Paul Bearer is going to be hung above the ring in a shark cage. This is reminiscent from maybe a decade before where they were doing this with J.J. Dillon or Jim Cornette.
Gary Hart.
The shark cage concept for a manager. What do you think of that?
If the manager had enough heat, was physically active enough, so you want to keep him or her out of the fray, it's okay. See it once a year, maybe you're good. So I didn't hate it. It's got to be built to that. It can't be, well, we're going to do this. Hey, let's do that shark cage thing. If that's because that's the best idea you got today to continue your storyline, it's probably the wrong reason, to be honest with you, Conrad. So I think if used correctly, I know the first time I saw one, I thought this is the coolest damned idea.
Right.
Because it really boils down to how well the person inside the shark cage, whatever.
Yeah.
How well they sell. They're uncomfortable. They feel threatened. It's dangerous. This thing can fall.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I saw it. But it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. You just got to, if it was built right, and certainly with Paul Bearer using that urn on multiple occasions to actually beat the Undertaker, him being separated and hanging high above the ring, you could make a story out of it. In other words, so we could sell that. But seeing it once a year or so, or later, even more frequently, infrequently, was okay. But I wouldn't want to see it all the time.
Let's talk about the next big match here for Mankind, and it's going to be at Survivor Series, and it's a little weird when you think about it. I mean, they had sort of a Undertaker and Mankind had a willy-nilly, loosey-goosey with the rules match at King of the Ring. We follow it up with a Boiler Room Brawl match, and then we follow that up with a Buried Alive match, and now we're just going to have a regular match, except with a manager in a shark cage. It feels like we got the order backwards from a traditional wrestling sense, right?
Well, you bring up a good point, and it may have been kind of a wonky sequencing. But I can see an argument being made for that, Conrad. But again, I think when this thing started, remember the origins of Mick coming here.
Yeah.
Coming to WWE. The long-term plans had not yet been established. So we were kind of going on the fly there. And I just think that nobody thought that far ahead, to be honest with you, because the thought of this thing being a huge success with Mick and Undertaker, nobody thought it wouldn't be good, but nobody thought it would last this long and that had this many matches. And a lot of the credit for that can be, should be acknowledged for Taker. Taker did more jobs for Mick Foley in the early going than he had done with anybody. As far as I can remember. There might be some isolated guy or something, but he was It worked out. It worked out well, but I don't think we've thought that far ahead, to be honest with you. Just all transparency.
The big thing about Survivor Series is not that Paul Bear's in a shark cage. It's sort of the rebirth of the Undertaker. That's the highlight. Since he's quote unquote dead, or I guess re-dead, I don't know. He comes down in a totally different presentation. He comes down from the top of the arena. He's wearing like a cape that makes him look like he's a fucking bat. He's got a teardrop tattoo on his cheek. It is a totally different presentation of the Undertaker we had seen before. Is this one of those things where, again, it's just time to freshen up the character and
Yeah.
it's like as good of a time as any?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole idea. He's a stalwart. He is a staple. He has not just long legs in reality, but he's got great legs for this character. But every character needs to be freshened up somewhat. You know, I remember when WCW wanted Ric Flair to cut his hair. God damn, that became a government issue. I mean, a big issue in wrestling. Oh my God, Ric Flair's gonna cut his hair. Holy shit. And I say to that, you got to be shitting me.
Right.
You're going to throw a shoe and have a vart over the fact that a guy's getting a haircut. Do you care? Are you that sensitive about your own life? Have you paid your taxes? Have you saved any money? Have you taken your kids to school? Have you done anything good other than fixate over a wrestling angle, you idiot? Come on. So I thought it was time. And here's the other thing, Conrad. Here's how it worked. It's something Taker wanted to do.
Right.
It's not unlike our show. We got great feedback, by the way, and I appreciate it because both of us enjoyed doing our show on WrestleMania 17.
Yeah.
And the Astrodome. It was a cool show. Great event. But you know, Austin wanted to turn heel. It was a terrible idea. That's what he wanted to do. And like I told you on our show, Vince said to me, I remember it vividly, we owe it to him to give it a try. And that shut me down. You're right, Vince, it does. We owe it to him. And we did. Same thing here. Taker wants to do a different presentation, different ring attire, all that stuff. We certainly owed it to him to give his instincts another try.
Let's get to the match itself. Meltzer would say this match made psychological sense, but it was nowhere close to the level of some of the previous matches these two have had. After doing the Boiler Room matches, Buried Alive matches, where Undertaker was all but killed, it's hard to put these two guys in a regular match and get people jazzed about it. Most of the way, it was Undertaker working on Mankind's fingers. Of course, that's how he applies the mandible claw. At one point, Undertaker had Mankind by the throat for the chokeslam, but Mankind got the mandible claw at the same time. Because the hands had been worked on, the claw didn't work to its normal level of effectiveness, and Undertaker was able to hit the chokeslam. Mankind came back from using a foreign object, but Undertaker hit the tombstone for the win. Bearer was lowered into the ring, but before Undertaker could do anything to him, the Executioner once again nailed him from behind. Taker came back and ran the Executioner off in a weak sequence, 2.25 stars. So he finally beats Mankind, and it feels like we're transitioning right to the Executioner, but it just feels less than, right? I mean, the stuff with Mankind was just better, and the audience knew it.
We wanted to go a one-off around the loop with Executioner, aka Terry Gordy. It just wasn't in the cards. It just wasn't there. And you got to protect your top guy, no matter what. And even though we knew that Terry's heart would be in the right place, he would try. And again, as we mentioned, we salivate to think of how great it would have been if we'd had Terry Gordy in his heyday doing this. It'd been off the charts. It'd been one of the most phenomenal moments and programs and angles in the history of WWE, in my opinion. Wrong place, wrong time. So we had to back out of that situation. Terry just could not get it done at that point.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next here for The Undertaker briefly. The next night on Monday Night Raw, Steve Austin is going to substitute for Vader, who's hurt. to face Mankind in a no holds barred match, and they open the show and they're the two top heels. This is sort of rare for the WWF at the time, but I think the idea is we've got to get Mankind off of the Undertaker because the Undertaker's moving on to the Executioner, and we'll talk about the next pay-per-view in a moment. But this is another one of those things where I sort of look back and think, just like we did at King of the Ring in June, hey, we're getting a little more loose with the rules here. But now we've got Steve Austin, a heel, taking on Mankind, a heel, in a no holds barred match on Raw. That wasn't really common in this era. It was usually, sort of white meat baby face versus our villain. And now we've got two bad guys. It was a fun match, but it feels like something new is brewing. Do you think Vince was more open to, less paint by numbers and trying new things? And how much of that is the influence of Vince Russo?
I think that even though Austin was booked as a heel, he wasn't being received universally as a heel.
I see.
And we had started the discussions that we got something special here with this cat. And so I think that's kind of where that came from, Conrad. Yes, it was a heel versus heel match, and you got to pick your dog in the fight if you're a fan. But I think it helped Steve get more recognized, get more focus, more of a spotlight, and they had and their match. I don't recall that match being bad.
No, it was a fun match. It's different. You used to see, a year prior, we would have seen Mankind wrestle Aldo Montoya here. It would have been babyface versus heel. And here, I don't know, there's more shades of gray. Let's talk about the next pay-per-view. In Your House, It's Time. We would see the Undertaker work with the Executioner. We know this is really going to be Terry Gordy's only stop in the road for the World Wrestling Federation. But Mankind's here, and he's actually put in a straitjacket during the match and then thrown through the entranceway, destroying the front door and the window of the old In Your House set. Even if he's not technically in the match, he's still doing his damnedest to steal the show and play his role, so to speak.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was so over at that point in time. And he was another guy that was, because people started respecting his work and they enjoyed his performances, he was another guy that was kind of swimming upstream as a heel because he was that unique. People kind of enjoyed his game. They enjoyed his shtick. And so, it was an interesting booking because both guys are kind of transitioning, one on a different level than the other, a different timeline, better said. So, but the Executioner thing, I felt so bad about that. I feel bad about it this very day because I had immense respect for Terry Gordy. And, when Gordy and Dr. Steve Williams were tag teams, I just thought they were the best.
Yeah.
And when they worked with the Steiners, to me, that was it, man. That was some good shit right there. As Vince would say, God damn it, that's good shit. And it was good shit. And, but he just, his lifestyle took a toll on him. And he just wasn't processing information as quickly. And we thought, well, he'll get back into that mode where things will just start coming natural to him. And it'll be instinctive muscle memory. And we didn't get that.
I want to mention that Mick Foley debuted April 1st. So you look at that and you think, in just a handful of months, 9 months, look at all he's accomplished. An incredible feud with The Undertaker, one of the matches of the year with Shawn Michaels. This is about as good of a debut as you could possibly have for any character. And considering that it seems so unlikely from the inner circle that they were even hesitant to bring him on. And now he sets the woods on fire, main eventing multiple pay-per-views and just an unbelievable 9-month debut for Mick Foley here.
He did pretty damn good for a guy nobody wanted.
Yeah.
I think he felt that too. I think Mick felt that, look, I'm not the most popular choice to even be here, much less get his opportunity to work with the Undertaker And thanks to the Undertaker's unselfishness and professionalism, Mick took advantage of the opportunity. He maximized his minutes, Conrad, quite simply. And he just did, it is astonishing what he accomplished, the events he headlined. And, you know, and to him, you know, Mick, the one thing about Mick, the only crack in the armor of Michael Francis Foley was the fact that sometimes he could be accused of caring too much. Very sensitive guy. Got his feelings hurt, like we all have, but easier than some, because he was very sensitive to, you know, he was born to do this. But if you're a football player, man, you want to play in the NFL. And Mick had been hanging around and doing some stuff to get bookings and territories that weren't as desirable as he might have preferred. So he finally got the opportunity to play in the NFL, the WWE, and he took advantage of it. Hats off to him for that.
Well, and hats off to you for taking so much time to break down Mankind's 1996. We're going to table 1997, but don't worry, it's on the schedule. We've already adjusted it. It'll be the first episode of June. We've already got our notes and our preparation, but next week it's time to talk about WrestleMania. Of course, WrestleMania season is upon us. We're going to go back and talk about the WrestleMania from 10 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia. The Rock was our special guest host, and our man, Jim Ross, was there for our main event, which saw The Miz come in as a heel champion to challenger John Cena. And unbelievably, The Miz won. We didn't send fans home happy, or did we? We'll find out next week. John Morrison is also going to be teaming with Snooki. That's right, Snooki and Trish Stratus. They'll be teaming up against Dolph Ziggler and Lay Cool. We've also got The Undertaker working with Triple H. Michael Cole is in there with Jerry Lawler. Lawler finally gets his WrestleMania moment, and wouldn't you know it, Stone Cold Steve Austin is the special guest referee. Randy Orton is in singles action against CM Punk. Big Show, Kane, Kofi Kingston, and Santino Marella will take on Ezekiel Jackson, Heath Slater, Justin Gabriel, and Wade Barrett. Cody Rhodes will be working with Rey Mysterio in singles action. Edge will be defending his World Heavyweight Championship against Alberto Del Rio. And we've also got some interesting sort of pre-show matches. Sheamus and Daniel Bryan for the U.S. title, and Great Khali, who's going in the Hall of Fame, by God, is going to win a battle royal, last eliminating Sheamus. A lot to unpack on what I would consider a rather forgettable WrestleMania. We'll talk about why that was when we talk about WrestleMania 27 next week. What do you think we might talk about, Jim?
I think I was an afterthought in that show, kind of falling out of grace, but for some reason, you know, with Cole and Lawler both involved in the match, you know, my services were required on that night. I remember on there was a show, was it the next night, I got squirted in the face with barbecue sauce, and nobody had thought, you know, tell you that you get barbecue sauce in your eyes, Conrad, it burns. Just so you'll know, even my good barbecue sauce, the original, it will burn your eyes. So don't squirt it in your friends' faces. Just not cool. And then I remember the next day on Raw, Jan and I were flying home, and I got a call, and I knew I shouldn't answer the phone. And I got it because they had to get Cole's heat back. So who did we use to get Cole's heat back, Conrad?
Your good old JR.
Good old JR. God bless him. So I went and did my work, and I got these hats I wear are custom made at a place in Oklahoma City at the stockyards called Shorty's Cowboy Hattery. And I have all my hats made there. They're about $1,000. Over the years, they've gotten more expensive. So they're about $1,000. I ruined a hat, which they WWE paid for, because it had barbecue sauce all over it and in my eyes. I even had to get the doctor, maybe with his Sanson or the other dude, to wash my eyes out with some sort of liquid to get the burning. I couldn't even see. So, but nobody gave a shit because that segment was over. Next. So there's some personal memories of that deal. And I'm glad I got to do the show in Atlanta where I lived, and I enjoyed living there. And when I worked for WCW, et cetera. But you know, It just, I really got the feel at that point in time. My time here is very limited, and I was kind of used as an afterthought, and that's the shits. When your career is to the point where the biggest decision maker in the whole 9 yards, Vince, believes that you've pretty much fulfilled your usefulness, and it's time to move on. And as a performer, I wasn't ready to move on.
Right.
You can say, well, JR, get your ego in check. You made a lot of money. He loves you. He made you rich. Blah, blah, blah. I saw that the other day. I don't know if JR can go on a podcast and knock Vince. Conrad, do I go on tirades about knocking Vince on the show?
No.
I tell the truth that we don't always agree philosophically.
Right.
So fucking what? What's that mean? And I think some millennials now look at the conversation or opposite opinions as looking as this tremendous conflict. Oh my God, this is terrible. And I probably overreacted to some degree. We'll talk about that. So it's an emotional show for me to discuss. And we'll certainly do that in all honesty when we reconvene next week. And while we're missing the sauce, our business has been great at jrsbbq.com.
It will burn your eyes, though. Put it on your meat, not in your face.
Yeah, on your protein.
Yeah.
You can put it on your meat, too, if you want to. But, hey, I want a whole harmless clause signed because your meat drenched in JR's barbecue sauce, probably not a good idea. But the protein, those ribs and the brisket and the chicken, I got on a tangent. I had barbecue chicken twice last week. And I just got I thought I was pregnant. I might have been pregnant for a while.
We'll find out next week.
So, anyway, our business has been good. We appreciate it. And a lot of our customers come from right here. jrsbbq.com. We've been out of this. Do you believe this? We had a run on seasoning and we ran out.
What?
Yep.
You better get that shit under control. I need some. I
got to have a conference with my, no, it's just, all of a sudden it got over, Conrad, and we gave it a nice push.
Yes, we did.
We all know how good the pushes are. You got to have a push. God damn it. I need my push. So, the business is good there. I did a little film roll, Paradise City, and it's on Amazon Prime. And I have not seen it, in all full transparency. But the feedback I'm getting from folks that have seen it has been very positive and very heartwarming. So if you get a chance to check out Paradise City on Amazon, what was it? Amazon Prime?
Amazon Prime. Anywhere you enjoy your Amazon streams, go check it out. Paradise City. Lots of names you'll recognize, but our favorite name, of course, Mr. Jim Ross.
That's right.
And we'll be back here next week talking WrestleMania 27. We've got a hell of a lineup scheduled for you. April 15th, of course, is famous. It's tax day. So what better to discuss than Mike Rotunda?
What a fun day.
June will also be the part 2 of what you're thinking you're getting here today. My apologies for that, but there's so much meat on the bone. We want to get justice. We want to do it right. So we'll wait and we'll pick it up around Mick's birthday, the first week of June. But next week, WrestleMania 27, right here on Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Who today's wearing a custom-made T-shirt from Box O Gimmicks. I love it. Thanks to our buddy Dave Silva, a.k.a. Bull Ramus, took care of me on some swag. So if you folks haven't looked to see what all we have on Box of Gimmicks, I know we sell a lot of shit here. You ain't got to buy nothing. Go look. It's pretty cool stuff. It's some funny stuff as well. So check that out, Box of Gimmicks. And Conrad, remember, whatever you do, buddy, heavy on the mister.
And heavy on the sauce at jrsbbq.com. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. We'll see you next week for WrestleMania 27.
Have a good week, everybody. Thank you.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.